Hey listeners, welcome back to the Apolitical Podcast. This is Magnus. Today's episode will cover the Wired expose covering Democratic Party aligned influencers who were signing contracts of secrecy with a group called Chorus.
Hey, this is Nate. I want to start by introducing Taylor Lorenz. I'm sure a lot of people at this point have heard of that name. Magnus and I have been following Taylor Lorenz for a while now. She's a reporter with Wired and with a few other publications as well. She primarily covers social media and technology. She recently did this expose on Wired talking about the course program, which was basically an initiative headed by Brian Tyler Cohen to support what he called independent Democratic influencers.
Well, and I think to myself, like that's a core thing of this backlash against this being revealed is that there's this sentiment often popularized by the creators themselves or BTC himself of that this is an independent venture when in the grand scheme of it, it is to promote more partisan politics.
Well, the biggest thing, and kind of what I want to talk about first, is how Democratic, basically establishment Democrats, have fundamentally misidentified what the issue, what the power dynamic here is in the political sphere.
Yeah, I remember this, that they were going on more, not necessarily like independent, but just podcasts that were not clearly politically aligned.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like, so you've got Joe Rogan, you've got the Nuck Boys, you've got Andrew Schultz, you've got Theo Vaughn, and they, in kind of a looser sense, they are partisan in that their politics are obviously more on the right side, but they are more accessible to like your average Joe, right? These aren't podcasts that partisans are listening to.
Well, and it's interesting as well. I think back to how Kamala Harris, once she became the nominee, did go on, like, for example, Call Her Daddy, which is a Barstool produced podcast. And go ahead.
Yeah, there seemed to be like a moment, like right as Kamala came out of the gate, there was like a moment where it seemed clear what they had to do, right? Was to engage with the average person. That was the whole thing with like Brad Summer. That was the whole thing with going on the podcast. That was the thing with calling Republicans weird, right? It was highly effective for a second, and then they just dropped it.
Well, and I think to myself is like, why would you not go on to, for example, Rogan, of the sense of if Trump's going to go on Rogan, why would you not also try to at least make an appearance? However, I think that what Democratic Party insiders would say is that that is validating somebody that is clearly lost in the sauce. Even before the 2024 election, he was getting involved with like the natural health community and like was promoting ivermectin, for example.
Yep.
So I think that they were unwilling. I don't even necessarily think that they were opposed to going on to a podcast with conspiratorial beliefs. It's more of validating that audience, and they don't think that necessarily there's people to win there. I would think maybe.
Which is funny because that's where your independents are. Like that's the thing. And I don't know if the answer is for Democrats to validate Joe Rogan. I know the answer is not to have partisan media be our focus, right?
Well, and that's the thing that I would like to really highlight is that, these creators that are involved, or Brian Tyler Cohen as a co-founder, acknowledged in all their reaction videos that this is a nonpartisan effort. However, what they mean when they say nonpartisan is that they're not explicitly promoting or endorsing a certain party or candidate. By a technicality, they're nonpartisan. However, we know that all of these people are liberals that lean towards the Democratic Party and have some minor I would say, tactical disagreements with the Democratic Party, but in essence view themselves as
Part of the
aligned,
same coalition.
yeah, and aligned with the party.
Yeah. It's funny because one of the biggest responses to all of this, to Taylor Lorenz, has been, it's been like, this is nonpartisan. We are not being handed a script. We're not being told what to say. This isn't democratic. We're not interested in. Brian Tyler Cohen said in his response, he's like, I literally think zero about the DNC. And then you look back 7 months ago, and like that's what they were talking about when they were introducing Chorus. They literally had a live stream dedicated towards interfacing voters with the DNC. And so it's like, do you care about being in the Democratic establishment or not?
Well, and I think in a way it's really hard for Brian Tyler Cohen specifically to counteract some of these arguments against him and his claims of being nonpartisan, because it's like, it took me forever to realize that he was running and operating the Occupy Democrats website and page that gets obviously millions and millions of views. And it just seems to me like that was an initial warning sign for me when I was watching his content, or even other people associated with the Chorus Fund, like David Pakman, is that their main objective is to fight and to counteract this growing sentiment of being against disinformation, and we yearn for truth. However, I think that it's a singular truth. Like we were talking a bit offline about how it's not necessarily that this is the one true way to defeat MAGA and Trump Republicans. It is the only acceptable way for them.
Yeah, so that kind of gets us to one of the biggest points that's been going around is like, is it acceptable for these influencers to take dark money? Are they on a leash? Are they falling in line? And we've talked about this a lot already, but perverse incentive structures, right? When you have an influencer specifically, because we do want to delineate here between like an influencer that's being funded by Chorus and by an actual journalist like Taylor Lorenz. When your livelihood as an influencer comes from this source, comes from Chorus, then you have a built-in incentive to stay on message, right? Regardless of who's telling you what to say, even if they're not, regardless if like you're not being given a script, it doesn't matter, because straying too far off message means you lose your revenue stream, right? All you have to do is do this simple thought experiment. If they started talking about how great Trump was, they would lose their money, right? So there's a line somewhere.
Well, and I think that makes me think, I think it's worth highlighting that point that you made of the distinction between journalists like Taylor Lorenz, who does cover social media and the impacts that it does have on our world and our politics, and these content creators. I think there's often a focus with content creators on authenticity. They're rebelling against the system. And we know now, based on Taylor Lorenz reporting in Wired, that this organization was being founded and put together to train these influencers and to coordinate with each other. I think there was even something mentioned in the article about like emergency responses, like this is how we're going to respond. Like, let's say, for example, over the weekend, there was a big story about, Trump being dead. So they would coordinate messaging with one another, and to say that, oh, we're not nitpicking or selecting precise terms and words that they must use is a bit of like, I view it as a technicality. Yeah, we're not writing a script for them, but we're also having coordinating meetings about coordinating messages about certain topics and about policies and about campaigns. And to say that it's nonpartisan strictly in the 501c4 nonprofit world aspect of, oh, they're not endorsing a certain candidate, is, I think, it's an excuse. It's to say that it's okay when we do it because this dark money isn't being used in an illegal way. Like, we're following the nonprofit rules. And it's like, well, the broader left, people beyond liberals for the last 10, 15 years have been saying that, we need to get money out of politics. And they are taking the lesson from 2024 is that we need to infuse more billionaire money even if they are quote unquote progressive into the system. That is the way to counteract a corrupt system.
Right. Validating dark money structures is fundamentally incompatible with hating things like Citizens United, right? Those are two competing beliefs. And even more than just the expose itself, right? Even more than Taylor Lorenz's writing, you can just look at their reactions. Right? Their reactions are very much in line with each other, where they're basically just casting doubt on her, which has, been kind of a very misogynistic effort to portray her as just an influencer instead of being a hard-hitting journalist. You can disagree with her. You can disagree with her methodology. You can disagree with her conclusions. But she's a tried and true journalist. Like she's not just out there putting out fluff pieces or putting out vague hunches. Like her stuff is thoroughly vetted. And Wired itself, they would have had to run this article by their legal department. So they didn't just frivolous. Oh my gosh, I can't talk.
Frivolously?
Yes. Put this article out. And then you look at all the influencers involved, and they're not only just like casting doubt on her, but they're saying it's been David Pakman was out there saying, which have been thoroughly debunked. They haven't been debunked. This is some like MAGA level crap of just like, it's not true.
It is a dismissal and a reaction. And I think this is what is a big thing about our podcast and what we would like to tackle is this reactionary impulse by many Democratic people in the sense of like big D Democrat, like aligned with the party in the sense that for so long we've been running reactions to Trump and the MAGA movement. For the first time in, I think, Trump's political career, when, Kamala and Tim Walz were announced as president and VP, that was the first time that I felt that the Democratic Party was on the offensive. And then the donors and the advisors that are Clinton holdovers, for example, are saying, this is not how we want to win. We cannot win this way. We can't outplay them at their own game of shit slinging, of, and I think some of these Democratic operatives are still the people that are arguing against Gavin Newsom's turn with his press office. But I think in a way they genuinely don't think that there's an issue with funding in that way. Like, I think a big thing that you and I kind of took issue with is the common sentiment, and like it seemed like a coordinated message of, what's wrong with making money? Do you want them to be poor?
I thought we were capitalists, guys.
Guys, I thought we loved capitalism. Didn't you remember that Biden said he just wanted like some like compassionate capitalism?
I just want a little bit of kindness with my money.
Yeah, like can we just incentivize people to do good with money? And it's like, well, it goes back to a broader topic of like the perverse incentive of just capitalism as a whole. And that's what these creators and these people that founded the Chorus Fund and, even further, like the 1630 Fund or any of these super PACs that are Democratic Party aligned, they think that they can win at the Republicans' game at certain avenues, especially if it allows them to make a career off of it. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that so many people were highlighting, was that you have a career that you're invested in. You've spent all this time trying to build a following and whatnot, learning all these things about how politics works. And liberals and these influencers think, who am I to be denied that? I've earned it.
And speaking of, I kind of want to tie this back around to like Gavin Newsom, you mentioned. It's really easy to see like how, I don't want to say coherent, how unified the messaging becomes, right? When you look at things like Gaza, when you look at things like trans people in sports, you look at the support, the fact that we are 3.5 years out from the next election, and we're supposed to be like rallying around Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, get on board or like basically get the fuck out of the party.
If you look at like what the response was to David Hogue, like the fact that he proposed like the bare minimum, just like, hey, maybe some of these people shouldn't be in position, and he got ousted so hard.
Yeah, and I think that like a huge thing is I even remember seeing some of the influencers involved with Chorus were directly speaking out against David Hogg. Like, oh, this white progressive thinks he can just kick out insert marginalized group, a representative of that marginalized group. Oh, is it because he's homophobic? Is it because he's racist? Rather than saying like, oh, maybe it's because they're old and they genuinely are dying in office. Like,
and if you watched any number of interviews with him, like he makes it pretty clear. He's like, we've got Democrats that are dying in office, and that is screwing us. And he's right. I mean,
well, and I think that this story really, I don't know, is a perfect viewpoint into the point of Democrats don't want to give up power, even the slimmest marginal amount of power. They view, like, for example, like not taking this dark money, not building these institutions funded by dark money as a losing play, versus understanding that this, if it comes out, which it will, if it didn't come out and get exposed by Taylor Lorenz now, it was going to come out, and that they think that they could minimize that damage by saying, oh, we're not controlling anything. We're just like, giving these people, in some cases, life-changing amounts of money, up to eight grand a month, $96,000 a year before taxes.
Which is almost 3 times the national median income.
Well, and I also saw like the inverse of, oh, not everyone got $8K a month. Some of these smaller influencers were getting, maybe $1,000 or a few $100s a month. Don't you think that those people are more tied by that perverse incentive?
Yeah, that's their livelihood right there. You mentioned a lot of the attacks against David Hogg were accusing him of targeting marginalized folks. We see some of that with this backlash against Taylor Lorenz too. A lot of people are accusing her of attacking marginalized creators, but a majority of the creators funded by Chorus are white.
Well, or I even saw people saying stuff along the lines of like, oh, we can't disclose who these influencers are, because I think one of the creators in the Chorus Fund offered an example of like a trans creator in a red state, for example. And honestly, I think that's just them saving their own ass. And
well, no, it's the typical, and I hate saying this term because it gets misconstrued all over the place, but it is like the liberal like id pull thing, right? Of using marginalization as a shield.
Yeah, from any criticism. And it's interesting that they aren't able to see, okay, explicit misogyny or racism or anti-Semitism. These Democratic Party aligned groups are unable to call that out. However, when it, if it fucks up their bag, if it fucks up their campaign, whichever candidate that the party prefers, that's when it gets called out. It's not, there's no principle there. And that's what I think a lot of the American people, the listeners of a Joe Rogan podcast, of a Theo Vaughn podcast, are sick of when it comes to American politics. And the Democratic Party has failed in being able to distinguish themselves and refuse to distinguish themselves from the Republican Party. The Republican Party has been able to rebrand as some working class party. The Republican Party, the country club Republicans, can now say, oh, Trump is signing an executive order in March, getting rid of all collective bargaining for all federal employees. And they can still say, oh, he's for the workers, he's for the people. And the Democratic Party is like, in some ways, shape or form, afraid to make those points. They don't want to face backlash.
And then you have our messiah, Gavin Newsom, calling Trump the nation's greatest socialist.
Oh, don't even get me started on like Gavin Newsom right now, like, is talking about crony capitalism, and
it's literally like the Democrats basically just define themselves by what they're not.
We are in opposite, and I think that they were not able during this election, or even like
even during Biden's election.
I was going to say, even during Biden's election, the way that I view the 2020 election, people were not super stoked to vote for Biden. People were sick of the fact that there was an authoritarian crackdown under Trump. The economy collapsed. He was telling everybody COVID's going to go away by Easter. And then the following president is out here saying COVID's over. COVID's done. And I want to mention real briefly that a lot of people take issue with Taylor Lorenz because she's been so advocating pro-masking, even on the individual level, which is like the bare minimum.
Right.
And I think you had shared with me that people had theorized that, oh, she's pro-mask because she's anti-vaccine. Like,
Which is a crazy take. Like, pro-masking is like the opposite of anti-vaxxing, because half the anti-vax argument is like, my bodily autonomy.
well, and I think it goes to this place of like, how do I want to describe this?
Well, it's funny because this whole anti-masking thing is that's another conversation.
Yeah, I think we could definitely go into this. I would just like to say that it's an example of liberals using the flip side of people were accusing her of being anti-vaccine by promoting masks. That is the flip side of saying Republicans saying the vaccine isn't 100%, doesn't have 100% efficacy, therefore it's trash, therefore it's not worth anything.
And speaking of the difference between like Trump and Biden on COVID, I think that really gets to the heart of this whole like Democrats are defined by what Republicans aren't. Because I think Biden was able to look back at Trump's mishandling of COVID and looking at American sentiment of like, we just want it to be over. So Biden just figured the most political expedient position was like, oh, it's over.
It is over because I declared it.
It's basically he just wanted to be the anti-Trump, which was like exacerbating and making the pandemic worse.
Well, and I will say that one of the things about the Republican Party and their pundits in the media is they are very good at building a public pressure campaign. Mm-hmm. So, for example, with COVID and Biden, probably a big reason why he was being pressured to declare COVID over, not just because that was a popular sentiment that people were wishing for, is that they were often talking about Biden lockdowns, or like, we could go into a whole nother topic of people forgetting who was president in 2020 and how that was able to be used during the 2024 election. Mm-hmm. And I think that this chorus story in a way shows that the Democratic Party have not learned that correcting the record is not enough. We live in a world that people indulge their fantasies in their lives.
But they don't even correct the record.
Yeah, often I think a lot of the times they've given up.
Like one of Emma Vigeland's biggest criticisms of Biden, aside from just, everything, is that he never used the bully pulpit. He had plenty of opportunities to get up there and say like, hey folks, this is what we need to do.
Well, and I think there was that quote, him talking about, oh, I'm just like the 52nd senator. It's like, oh, great, dude. While the Republicans are anointing a king under Trump, he's basically saying, I can't do anything. I'm sorry. Whoopsies. Or, we're seeing now in Trump, too, his second term, that, what was stopping Biden, which was these nationwide injunctions for like his student loan debt forgiveness. He just, as soon as there was an institutional roadblock, he was like, okay, we're not going to fight no more.
Well, and you're looking at now, like, it was, man, I saw two politicians talking about what the Democratic platform should be for 2028. And one of the things on their list was packing the courts. And I'm like, that's been a thing, like, on the Democratic to-do list for, like, what, three elections now?
Well, it makes me think about, like, how Biden was like, we will codify Roe v. Wade. And a lot of people saw right through that of like, this is a thing that the Democratic Party can always promise, never deliver on, and campaign on perpetually for.
Just like with immigration reform, just like with trans protections.
Well, and it's like at a certain point, there's a reason why people don't believe them anymore. Yep. And they think that they can throw money at it. That if they can buy authenticity, if they can buy a connection with a Democratic leaning audience, that they can win them back.
And then so you end up with this party that they can't make the case. They literally can just not make a case for their own policy. All they can do, they're stuck in this permanent mode of reaction. That's all they can do, is they put their finger to the wind and like, okay, that's our politics today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have made this criticism of the Democratic Party of like, everything is means tested as far as policy. Every not even necessarily policy, but every statement is focus grouped. And, that is getting those focus group terms and policies and viewpoints are getting associated with the broader left. And the fact that liberals are allowed to say essentially, oh, I'm a progressive and therefore I'm on the left. And it's like, but in all reality, you don't challenge any of the institutional power. You don't challenge, U.S. hegemony around the world. You think that that's a good thing. And it's this thing of like, because this is the way it is in various things, that is the way it ought to be.
Well, and if you look at like Alyssa Slotkin's like war plan when that thing came out, and she was telling us that like, oh, Democrats need to stop using the word woke because focus groups. And it's like, if you think about the word woke, who's talking about it? It's Republicans, it's conservatives, it's everybody's uncle at Thanksgiving that's out there on social media talking about the word woke, or your grumpy coworker talking about the word woke and how bad it is. And so you get into a focus group when that is the predominant attitude, when no Democrats, no liberals are actually making a vocal case for DEI wokeness, for progressivism, for whatever you want to call it, then of course that's going to be the dominant attitude. And then that's going to be your takeaway, right? Like, oh, we got to stop saying the word woke, guys. That's hurting us.
Well, and this fact that like, that's what I mean is we're not going to be able to outplay the Republicans at their own game of making something that's so minute. Most people probably hadn't even come across the term woke or CRT or any of these other boogeymen, and they're able to take it from their siloed like information bubbles and make it seem as though this is respectable. Mm-hmm. And I don't see really Democrats in their messaging trying to do that ever. Like there's this, I think that the way that the Democrats do it is in an objective way. Therefore it's not sensationalized and it's not new. Like, for example, like I saw a clip going around of a lot of Democratic representatives and senators talking about, X, Y, and Z recent Trump thing that he did is unprecedented. Like that became the word of the year essentially. And yeah, the NPRs, the
Ezra Klein's.
Yeah, the AP, the mainstream will talk about it as unprecedented because that's just objective. But there's nobody really leading the way talking about, hey, there should be.
What should this look like?
Yeah, like what is an alternative? What does a post-Trump world look like? Right. And I think, we talk a lot of the time offline about a failure of imagination. And I think a lot of liberals wishfully believe that there's going to be a post-Trump America and can't wrestle with the fact that that is unlikely. There will be people that will take up that mantle.
To be clear, there will be a post-Trump America. It's just not going to look like what liberals think it's going to look like.
Well, I think that this, the Hillary Clinton, I think it was Clinton talking about like, we just need respectable Republicans. It might have actually been Nancy Pelosi, but talking about like, oh, we just need a strong Republican Party again. It's like, they are outright saying like, we should throw Democrats in jail. Mm-hmm. The party should essentially be banned. Because they're hurting our children by the trans agenda or whatever, or they're allowing immigrants and they care more about immigrants. You don't ever see the Democratic Party on the offensive in that way.
Well, I mean, how many times a week do we see like, oh, this pastor, oh, this congressman, oh, this Republican voter touched a child and is going to jail now?
Yeah, and it's this. I've been thinking about this in my personal life too. It's like, if people expect more of you, if you meet that expectation, there's not a recognition. Like people expect less of the Republicans. And so when they do the smallest modicum of like, pandering to the working class, they're like, oh my God, Donald Trump is fucking for the working class. And then if Biden, Harris, any Democratic politician goes and does the exact same thing, gives the same speech in front of the same crowd, they view that as pandering. They say, oh, that's not authentic because certain party, a party affiliated person is saying that. And I think like we see this in a broader scheme of like how this term of like sane washing Trump, like trying to make, like, even during his first administration, trying to make statements that are absurd seem like, oh, well, maybe this is what he was thinking. And I think, like, so many liberals made insane amount of money, you know, having their own personal Substacks, like basically being a Trump whisperer.
There's another part of this too, because you mentioned how like it looks inauthentic when Democrats do it, right? There is a certain mechanism where it's like Trump supporters support his flaws because they see that as just that's him. But if you look at Democrats, like, I'm sorry, but Bill Clinton never faced enough backlash, enough consequences for essentially sexually assaulting an intern.
It would be interesting to kind of look deeper into that, because I would not be shocked if there was a reaction within the liberal sphere, the Democratic sphere, of like, what? We can't get laid? What? We're just not supposed to have sex? Because like that was the response to,
you
like,
prudes.
Ugh. Oh, I thought we were being sex positive. What about the sexual liberation movement?
Women can have sex with their bosses now, okay?
Okay, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it actually doesn't reinforce patriarchy or any of these other structures.
I just want to clarify, like, God bless Monica Lewinsky.
Literally being through all that she's been, and still somewhat being like a public person.
And having a sense of humor about it all.
Yes, very much so. I love that interview where they're talking about how many times she's mentioned in rap songs, and she takes it well in jest.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's the thing, is that the Democratic Party does not want to reckon with, hey, we can make mistakes. There's a reason why the American public don't trust us. Mm-hmm. And rather than doing anything policy-wise to try to gain back that trust, they've decided to say, hey, the Republicans are outgaming us when it comes to social media. And that is, it's like what we see with like how they're covering Mom Donnie's primary win. Oh, it was strictly because of these slickly edited videos. It's not because he's advocating for a rent freeze in like one of the most expensive cities, not just in this country, but in the world. Like,
well, I mean, being competent in the social media space certainly helped him. But the bottom line is he said the right things. He was campaigning the right way. He was talking to people. He was on the ground. He wasn't doing this fucking, this freaking ivory tower crap.
Hey, we curse on this podcast.
Okay, that's fair. I look back to 2016. What was Hillary Clinton doing during her campaign? She wasn't talking to the people.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like, like Democratic politicians are going to get chastised because they're, not visiting quote unquote flyover country. But it's like Republicans do that exact same shit and nobody gives a fuck.
But it's expected.
Yeah, like that's the thing, is there is an expectation that the Democratic Party can just be marginally better. And so many people have lost faith, have just completely given up and say, hey, fuck it. Donald Trump's promising that, the roads are going to be paved with gold. So fuck it. People would rather believe in a fantasy than they would like be let down.
Believe in a failure?
Yeah, believe in the failure, and that failure could change.
And that's where we get with this whole course thing, or even just like the gerrymandering or rallying around Gavin Newsom, is we're in this environment where even amidst all the bullshit that Trump is doing, all the negative press that Republicans are getting, the fact that Republicans can't even go to their town halls, and yet Democrats have a lower approval rating. And so we end up in this situation where they will literally do anything before solidarity. They will threaten to gerrymander their own states. They will fund their own partisan media, but they won't do the bare minimum of just like acknowledging that trans people have a right to exist and live their lives, or acknowledge the fact that deportation is kind of evil.
And I think that, that trickles down to the party, like constituents, because I often hear this, thought terminating cliche of like, what are we supposed to do? Nothing. Like, that's what we're supposed to do, just not do anything. And it's like, no, we could fundamentally change the media landscape the way that, the Republicans have over the last, 30 some odd years. It's like, if we were allowing people to run for office, potentially even win, oh my God, wow, on these bold progressive statements, if these people were allowed to go on, for example, like a C-SPAN, go on to Fox News, like I saw so many people, talk poorly of like a Bernie, for example, going on to Fox News or having the Fox News town hall.
Yep.
Oh, but if Mayor Pete, who's the good liberal, who's the McKinsey consultant, he's good in, the consultant class. If he goes on there, oh, he's so brave. Oh my God, look what he's doing. Like, wow. If only all the liberals could fight like this. And it's like, oh, but when somebody actually is adversarial and challenges not only the rights power, but power in general, it's like, well,
and that's just it, right? It's like Democrats they're not just positioned against Republicans, they're also positioned against leftists. And that's where you get like, going back to Mamdani, he's not a radical leftist. He just isn't. He is on the left. He has socialist proposals, but his stuff is not out there, not by any means. And yet he's not even tolerable. The fact that despite his wild success, despite his ability to mobilize and to stay on message, just the fact that he's just a little bit out of line means he gets full condemnation or indifference from the party. You look at like Omar Fateh, and they withdrew their endorsement of him.
Yeah, and I think it also, like, with David Hogg as well, like, is it Hogg?
I don't know.
Okay.
I was just laughing because no, you're right. It's like he wasn't proposing anything radical. His entire plan was challenging Democratic primaries in safe seats.
This is kind of tangentially related, but I also think about like how Biden's message in 2020 primary is, I will beat Donald Trump because I will. Like, and that became evident after he did win, but it wasn't some resounding victory. And I think that there's this belief that, there's serious politics and, whether it's Taylor Lorenz, Zoran Mamdani, any sort of even just vaguely progressive, somewhat left-leaning Democratic Party pundit or candidate, they're viewed as not serious.
Yep.
The party doesn't want to swallow that hard medicine, but will then look at all of the people that they beg for votes every 4 years, every midterm. They will say, you need to swallow this and fucking smile. You're going to vote for Biden. You're going to vote for a Hillary Clinton. You're going to vote for a Kamala Harris. And if you don't, what, do you want the other thing? And apparently the American public of those that vote said, yeah, we will like something that's offering us a different vision of America. People want change. And to not offer them that, in 2020, Biden saying fundamentally nothing's going to change, that only speaks to the donor class. That only speaks to the advisors.
There's like a common conversation on Twitter right now about, with the situation in Palestine, people are blaming third-party voters or non-voters.
We saw the same thing with deportation too.
Yep, and it's people saying like, see, if Kamala were in office, this wouldn't have happened. And it's like Kamala was supporting Israel not last year, but the year before, when she was still vice president, underneath Biden. She was supportive of his policies. Any answer she ever gave during her campaign was always super waffly, right? She was like, I believe in Israel's right to be secure, and I also condemn the suffering in Gaza.
But we should also have a ceasefire.
We also have a ceasefire. I believe in a one-party.
We're not going to talk about who violates the ceasefire.
Yep. And it's this thing. It's like it's not Kamala's fault for endorsing Zionism, right? It's our fault for electing the wrong Zionist.
Yeah, that hits the nail right on the head. And it circles back to this point of it's serious and respectable politics to support Israel. If you don't, and like I think we've seen this in a lot of instances of like, oh, if you believe, for example, that like, hey, Israel shouldn't be able to occupy Palestine in the West Bank and in Gaza and, have an open air prison. If you think that that's unserious, you're just, some loony campus lefty. And once you get out in the real world, you'll understand how it works. And
it's patronizing.
It very much is so. And I think that everyone's sick of it. Everyone is sick of hearing from the Democratic Party, fall in line.
Yep.
This vote blue no matter who. What, you want to vote for Trump? You want to vote for the MAGA Republicans? And I think a good amount of people said, fuck it.
And why
not?
That's the insanity of all this, right? Especially with the chorus thing, is essentially what it comes down to is Democrats think it is the voters' responsibility to vote them in. They do not see it as their own responsibility to win over voters.
Absolutely. They think the onus is on us to come along. And so that's why they view the solution as, oh, if we could just reach these people, if we could, somehow artificially spread the reach of Brian Tyler Cohen, a David Pakman, even like Midas Touch, for example. Like, hey, if we could just get the reasonable Republicans on our side, we can they would rather build a unity coalition with Republicans and former Republicans than they ever would want to endorse anyone that is even left of Joe Biden.
Yep.
And I want to make this point too, that Kamala Harris, in the moment where Biden was fucking unpopular, he dropped out for a reason. They asked her, I don't remember which outlet it was on, but they asked Kamala, hey, what policy differences are you going to have? Nothing. She in the affirmative said nothing. I think she's obviously in a spot that I don't envy, of having to run essentially as an incumbent on your predecessor's platform.
Well, and that's the thing, right? It's like, I don't envy Kamala's position, right? That's not easy. Your direct boss, the guy that's the head of the country, and you're being asked to speak out against him, okay? But the end of the day, this isn't a criticism of Kamala Harris. This is a criticism of the Democratic machine.
Yeah, that keeps reproducing these candidates.
Right.
And reproducing these advisors.
This isn't a personal failing of Kamala Harris, of Biden, of BTC, of David Pakman. It's a collective failure. It's the whole darn thing is just free falling to the ground. And then they're pointing at everybody outside saying like, nope, this is your fault. This is your fault.
Yeah, and I just wonder like what the inside shop talk is of, like, they're looking at, like, let's say for example, Trump going on Rogan. They probably look at that view count, right? And they say, oh man, if only we could just have, like, I think there was a lot of talk post-election. What about liberal Joe Rogan? Do we not remember that before this man's brain was broken, he was not even liberal. He was a anti-establishment Bernie supporter.
The thing is like, the people who say we need a leftist Rogan fundamentally misunderstand why Rogan works.
And like also who he's appealing to.
Right.
Because in a lot of ways he's appealing to that anti-science,
And that's why Chorus fails so hard at what it's trying to do. That's why this whole thing is an issue. It's because the Democrats and their donors have incorrectly located the problem within liberal voters, right? They think it's just a failure for the base to rally around them. When the fact of the matter is they aren't reaching average people. They just aren't. And then so to double down on that same structure, to just fund people who are going to say the things they want them to say, and to kind of, it's like a narrowing, right? It's going to be any chance that these creators in particular had any chance of like venturing out a little bit, that's gone. They're now going to fall in line.
Yeah, and I just don't think that, people will see through that. And even if not it's not going to reach other people other than the people that were already following some of these creators or related creators that are Democratic Party aligned. And it kind of reminds me of how, like, there's been this, embrace of like, oh, well, they had Project 2025, so we need a Project 2028 or 2029. Yep. And
it's just all this we fight fire with fire.
Yeah, if the right's going to lean towards Silicon Valley technocrats, maybe we should have some Silicon technocrats on our side, A lot of these same people were the people that, like, when there was the rift between Elon and Donald Trump and Elon's posting like, "Hey, Donald's in the Epstein files. Have a good day, DJT."
Yep.
There were quote unquote serious liberal pundits saying maybe we ought to flip him.
Oh yeah, we need to get Elon back. It reminds me of the people who say like, remember when Elon Musk used to be on the left? I'm like, when?
Or that like he was. I don't understand this sentiment as well, that like he was popularly supported. It's like, oh, he was in Iron Man 2. Yeah, like, okay, he could still show, like, in Trump's Hollywood, he could fucking show up again. Like,
but even if you look at like, okay, so like right now, a big topic within liberal circles on the topic of technocrat is abundance.
Oh right? Yeah.
And that's basically like, it's the liberal answer to Republican deregulationism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Republicans, conservative voters, independent voters, they see regulation as a problem. They want deregulation. Deregulation is a good word, right? It's something you say and people are like, yeah. And then so the liberal answer is like abundance, deregulation, but blue.
And I think that's like a large, I think that really summarizes what the Democratic Party is here in this moment, is how can we do what the conservatives are doing, these Republican, the MAGA types, how can we do it with liberal aesthetics? How can we, roll back, child labor protections, but like in a liberal way?
And it's like, not only are the liberal aesthetics ineffective, but the actual policy really, really sucks, actually.
Absolutely. And we're going to keep trying. Like, I think a policy that I think of that in these next few years, or like even already up to this point, that the Democrats have basically conceded is, what about like public schooling? Like, they've basically said like, well, these parents should have a choice, or like, oh, well, like, when it comes to schools, oh, well, don't you think that like school sports should be segregated by sex? Like, it's just for fairness.
Talking about like the parent choice, like I see a lot of liberals unironically defending that. Like, well, I do think parents should have a say in where their kid gets an education.
Well, and I think like the Republican machine is so good at making mundane things seem nefarious and nefarious things seem mundane. Oh, we're great at like being able to market this, oh, it's just parents' choice. But like a parent's right to choose, when it initially started out, was a propaganda scheme by industrialists to fight against child labor. Like, these things that the Republican Party has been able to use and weaponize this terminology and fundamentally change definitions of words. For example, like how they've changed, we talked about woke, but this war against empathy even.
Yes, yep.
They are fundamentally changing the world, while these liberal Democrats are saying, how can we keep it the same? How can we do marginal reforms? Oh yeah, like we would like more acceptance for, marginalized groups, but not at the expense of my own comfort.
Well, look at immigration. This whole thing. Sorry. The biggest response to...
I think that exasperation is warranted.
The entire response to Trump's immigration policies has been like, no, if they don't belong here, like deportation, that's fine. Just got to do it the right way. The thing is like, it fundamentally accepts a bad faith premise, right? When Republicans were saying they just want to deport the criminals, like, I'm sorry, but they were lying. They weren't telling the truth. They weren't actually saying what they want to do. And then so when Democrats come on scene and they're like, I thought you guys just wanted to deport the criminals. You don't look smart. You look naive.
Yeah, and we've talked about this whole, the futility of hypocritical much. The known liars lied.
Oh, you guys pardon all the insurrectionists. I thought you backed the blue.
Well, and I think it goes back to this broader point of the American people generally are more fantastical with our beliefs. We like to believe in, hell, even American exceptionalism is a fantastic belief. And not in the general like connotation of like, oh, it's great, but in the sense that it's unbelievable. that, this plot of land was quote unquote empty, and that we just really made it so much better. And like, I think that oftentimes there's this reaction by liberals of like, we did the hard things that needed to be done. Oh, they may had some unsavory things, but it was necessary. Whereas, Republicans are coming out and saying like, actually, Manifest Destiny was good. Like, they're arguing in the affirmative when the liberal Democrats can't even argue against that and say, hey, actually, that was abhorrent and wrong. You get...
Well, that's just it. They would never say Manifest Destiny is wrong, right? They would just say like, well, it's complicated.
Well, the complicated history of it, you see. And actually, don't you know it was a Republican president that did that? So don't even like look into any of the Democratic politicians that...
And reparations, that's just not reasonable.
It's just a handout, and it's like, it's just too much, and we just don't have enough. And like, I think that an issue that liberals agree with Republicans on, and even independents like libertarians and the such, just broadly centrists, is they believe in this scarcity mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We're simultaneously the greatest country in the world, despite various metrics proving that not to be the case. And they're able to point that out when they're arguing against Republicans. But then there's always this like reactionary, like, they can't necessarily refute all the bad things that America has done and contend with that. So I often hear like, well, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Couldn't imagine myself. And I think that's more honest. They couldn't imagine themselves living anywhere else.
The critique is uncomfortable, so they just pretend the critique is invalid.
I mean, that ties directly into, this chorus thing, how we were talking about earlier, how Taylor Lorenz, as a white woman, her identity is being weaponized against her as this white woman is attacking black creators. And it's like, okay, for example, we haven't necessarily dropped anyone that's named that isn't large like BTC or Pac-Man, but like that Too Raw, Too Real creator on Instagram, nothing but complete id pull. And the thing is that
he's the poster child for, like liberal individualism, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Everything comes down to is like, well, that person's bad, this person's good, that person's racist, that person's homophobic. Like what was the clip we watched? The clip we watched, it was something like, somebody made a joke about sucking the Democrat's dick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his immediate response was like, oh, so you're being homophobic? I'm sorry, as a gay person, it's stupid, right? Because I don't know what reality you're living in, but everyone sucks dick.
Well, and this, like, it is a weaponization of identity. It's saying I am above critique. The Democratic Party is above critique. Kamala Harris is above critique as a black woman. And it's like, I think that something that...
Or like Pete Buttigieg.
Yep. And I think that you had brought up this point that liberals really emphasize this. I think you had used this term. I don't know if it's original term by you, but like the moment of arrival. They so much focus on first. Like Kamala would be the first woman president, the first black woman president. And in the grand scheme of things...
Or Pete Buttigieg would be the first gay president.
Rather than being like, hey, for example, if we had universal childcare, for example, that would be the first time in this country that is a thing. They could say, oh, that's new. That we're making change.
And liberal individualism itself is way more concerned with representation than it is without like material benefit. Yeah. And it's so much so that they just ignore the text that's there in front of them, right? You look back at 2016's election, and a lot of people say like, oh, well, Hillary Clinton lost because of misogyny. Or you look at 2024, and people are like, oh, well, Kamala lost because of misogyny and racism. And it's like, yes, Hillary dealt with a lot of misogyny. Kamala dealt with and still deals with a ton of racism. Like I see these comments all over Twitter, about her being the quote unquote Curry candidate. The misogyny and racism, they're real. They're fundamentally absolutely real. They're constantly weaponized even now, a year later. And it's also not the reason they lost.
Yeah, and it provides a shield for those politicians to say, any valid criticism, any sort of distasteful remark that you may not be, ecstatic about, is you don't like it because of who the messenger is.
Yep.
You can't possibly dislike the policy or the message. It's simply who, and I think that that's where like a lot of liberal opposition to Trump comes from, is like they're not willing to say the same thing. Like, I don't think anybody in terms of like the 2024 debate of like they're eating the cats and the dogs, nobody was able to say like, hey, that's
racist.
Yeah, it's racist, and it spread from literally neo-Nazis on Telegram.
Yep.
Like, maybe the more liberal aligned media were able, like investigative journalists, which we absolutely do need, but we don't need content creators just coming out here to say, well, that's not true. That's just not true.
Yep.
I think that is really emblematic of the Democrats did not learn anything from the last 3 elections. Americans want to believe in fantasies and lies, even if they're scary.
Yep.
Like, they would rather believe that with their whole heart, and they look for proof. I remember after that election, people were just posting random shit and saying, oh, look at this. Oh, a man's carrying a duck, like not even in the same town, and just in Ohio.
Yep.
That's proof.
The Haitians are eating the pets.
Yeah, and the thing is that, they're afraid to say the truth. Like, I think back to
it's like a Harry Potter morality, right?
yes,
There's just good people and bad people. There are not good people and good actions and bad actions.
well, and this whole thing of like they weren't able, like, basically from what I remember, Biden completely backed down after he gave that speech on the White House lawn, talking about how I don't even necessarily think he said Trump, but like Trump and the MAGA movement are quote unquote semi-fascist.
Oh yeah,
and
he couldn't even fully commit to that.
No, they're afraid to do 10 toes down on fucking anything that isn't institutionally verified.
And even as we mentioned before, like when Kamala first came out and she did the weird thing and it caught fire, and then all of a sudden, nope.
Yeah, let's actually erase that, and let's stop being mean to the voters.
Hey guys, look, I've got Liz Cheney.
Yeah, like while Trump and his campaign can basically be like, I wish all Democrats would die. But hey, he's going to be the unity candidate. He said so.
Does it seem kind of harsh that we're calling them weird?
Have we considered their feelings? Hey, maybe they're onto something. The toxicity of empathy, They're here's the thing. They're willing to empathize with class allies.
Yep. Yes.
And they're not willing to empathize with anyone that has a semblance of class antagonism. Class antagonism, like, it's that whole like trend of like, what's classy when you're rich, but trashy if you're poor. Class antagonism. You can say in every major public outlet that like, oh, homeless person commits crime. But when was the last time we were like, oh, white collar criminal shoots his wife?
Yep.
Like, it would be interesting, and I think maybe we could do this as like a jumping off point, but like I think it would be interesting to maybe like independently or even on the pod like talk about the rejection of New Deal populism and how benefiting people, holy shit, can actually win over their votes, rather than saying, looking people in the eye and saying good things are impossible, and here's why, because the Congressional Budget Office says that like it would raise the deficit, and we don't want to do that. Like, that's a Republican thing.
Looking people in the eye and saying, you don't know what oligarchy means, you fucking dumbass.
You can't even look up a you don't even know English. Yeah,
we should just say kings instead.
Yeah, we're just against kings. And we could go on a whole tangent of just like how I view the fact that like,
Look, guys, if you want to know anything about Alyssa Slotkin, just go watch the Breaking Points interview.
Yeah, hey, that is a good example of like, I don't think you can necessarily draw a one-to-one connection, but that is an example of why they want to create chorus. They want, in the contract, it talks about how you need further verification or authorization to interview some of these candidates.
Yeah, no, it's almost like a protectionism against candidates. It's basically the chorus attempt is like the antithesis to David Hogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they don't want to fathom that their own candidates could be attacked, could be assailable in any capacity.
Well, or it's like I saw so many. We even watched some of the reactions, and I think we'll be including these in the episode when it launches. But there's so much of this like, oh well, it's just this like this moral flattening. Like we can't observe and critique the way that the Democrats are moving because Donald Trump's deporting people. Donald Trump is mobilizing National Guard, and if you're not talking about that, it's like this reverse flip of like we can't criticize the or the Democratic Party. It goes back to that point of we can't criticize the Democratic Party because we believe that they would have been better on Gaza.
Or if that episode we watched of Dollemore, where he was basically like he kept saying it. He's like Trump is deporting people to foreign gulags right now, and you want to talk about this?
You want to talk about money corrupting politics?
And but right now Trump is doing bad things?
Yeah, hey, haven't you checked in on your Orange Man Bad meter recently?
Aren't you outraged?
Yeah, can't you be outraged? You can't be outraged at multiple things at once or else you're a traitor. And actually maybe you're right wing. And I think that that's what we've also seen against Taylor Lorenz. Like maybe she's an op. She's a double agent, folks.
She's intentionally trying to create division. So let's not examine why that division exists.
Yeah, versus actual content creators of various ilks that are absolutely with their content being so divisive, saying that the Democratic Party is not a big tent party. We saw it with the reaction to the primary win of Zoran Mamdani. They've outright said there's no room for him in the party. Yep. But we should make room for, what's her name? Dick Cheney's daughter, Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
We should be a big tent, but that only means if we're inviting independents and Republicans.
Well, and it's like how can you sit there and look at Taylor Lorenz's journalism, say this is creating division within the party, and then not look at creators like what's his face, Dean Withers, or look at creators like Good Trouble or Olivia
Juliana.
Yeah, Olivia Juliana. But it's like if you look at their reactions, if you look at the way they're going after Taylor Lorenz, or basically side-eyeing anybody who agrees with her or lends her credence, it's like, how is that not creating division? Because they don't see leftists as legitimate, as serious.
Yeah, and how is that any different than the way that MAGA portrays us? And the thing is I was astute enough and aware enough to say that even if Biden wins the 2020 Democratic primary, they are going to call him Commie Joe. That talking point eventually shifted because they knew it wasn't as appealable because obviously Biden is not.
Well, that's another part too, right?
He was controlled. He was controlled by these. He was a CCP puppet.
That's another part too, though, right? Is they Democrats want to keep creating distance from leftism, right? And then that just makes it really easy for Republicans just to paint whoever they don't like as leftist.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think about the fact that okay, we've been talking a little bit about the New York mayoral race, and now how MAGA's coming out in favor of either Eric Adams, who is actually absolutely bought and paid for by the Trump admin with getting,
and by Turkey's government.
Yep. Hey, made that thing go away real quick. Or Andrew Cuomo. If those people win, that right-wing outrage media sphere will immediately start being they're socialists too.
And we'll have the added benefit of having a rapist in office.
Yep. And hey, maybe that's why some of them are we actually like Cuomo over, there's there's a dichotomy. You either want the sex pest Italian or you want the black cop.
We would literally have corrupt politicians before a leftist.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is like, they want people that are compromised. They want people that can be controlled, and it's not even like as nefarious. Like, I think with the chorus thing, it's like without evidence that they're directly coordinating every precise word, every punctuation on any written statement. Granted, their written statements sound identical. Therefore, you cannot say that is an influence,
right?
That is controlling, that having that perverse incentive structure of, hey, I might not be able to pay my rent this month because, through chorus and the 1630 fund, I might be out. So maybe I should just toe the party line and say, oh, like, I think that, I want to go back to the point where we were talking about how Harris is viewed as a saint and that she would have saved Gazans.
Yep.
She would have done nothing different than Joe Biden.
Right.
It would have been endless think pieces in the New York Times, all these liberal establishment outlets of Kamala troubled by what she's seeing in Israel. If only she was president.
I sure wish Netanyahu would stop.
I wish he could just knock it off.
I think I am taking the brave stance that I think the people living in Gaza are human beings.
Am I going to do much about it? No.
I'll get back to you on that.
I'll talk to you. I'll ask my advisors.
I'll talk to my people. You talk to your people. We reconvene.
Listen, we are going to fund the Iron Dome because that's serious politics.
Yes.
That's the real stuff.
Big boy and big girl politics.
Well, and I feel like that also comes from like, the liberal media was obsessed with like, who are the adults in the room with Trump's first term? And it's like, or maybe they're all insane and sycophants. Like, they're not there because like they're going to offer any pushback to Trump that he doesn't deem acceptable.
What are the biggest things right now? If you do actually watch like BTC, or if you watch David Pakman, or if you watch the Midas Network, it's a really common thing. They talk about like, oh man, the courts are doing so much to like slow Trump down, and no, they're not.
Yeah, he's steamrolling them.
He's absolutely steamrolling them. It's like we're basically hearing about the instances where the courts are pushing back on them, like with like Boasberg or Heinous. And in the vast majority of cases, they're giving him permission to do what he's doing. And then if it gets up to the Supreme Court, you can basically bet on them giving him permission anyway. We take procedural stops and be like, oh my God, they shut him down. And it's like, no, that was a hiccup.
Yeah, I think often what, and I think that this chorus, fund and scholarship for, creators to really find their voice and, broaden their audiences would just have this sort of like uniform response of very minute like differences, but it would just be the same old shit that is not convincing anyone that's an independent or right leaning of like, oh yeah, maybe Trump is a bad guy.
Yeah.
And I think
that's the biggest thing right now is like, it's like Trump is a bad guy and nobody's convinced that Democrats have anything better to offer.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I don't think that they can really contend with that. They don't want to look themselves in the mirror and say, we're willing to do everything, but like shit, I would even take like, let's just lie. Just lie. Just lie and say you're going to do it at least. Get the people, like they're not afraid to lie. Like you're willing to adopt every other tactic other than to say, hey, we're going to at least just fucking lie and say like, hey, there's going to be Medicare for all. No, we're going to outright say we're going to veto it.
They're committed to integrity up until the point of actually having coherent policy.
Yeah, like as soon as that, and this is not just, for the Democratic Party, but like also these influencers, as soon as it fucks up the bag, they're not willing to stand on principle.
Nope.
And
which is why they're not talking about Palestine.
And to a degree, it's like people make this point that like, oh, these other small creators within the fund are, I think, say what you will about me, say it's conspiratorial, but they're trying to get a younger demographic, for example, like people that aren't reached by a Brian Tyler Cohen, Olivia Juliana, a Pac-Man. They're trying to get those younger audiences to align with a more, oh, well, yeah, we can recognize the humanity of Palestinians, but just throw our arms up in the air. What
Doesn't
can we
Israel
do?
have a right to exist?
Also,
Do you condemn Hamas?
Also, isn't it just like Netanyahu's doing it? Like, the guy that gets like a standing ovation from Republicans and Democrats when he's welcomed into the halls of Congress to give a speech. Like, they are. It's just endlessly frustrating, and I don't understand in a world like ours where politics are so fantastical, they refuse to recognize the moment that we're in. And as soon as anything threatens their bottom line, as soon as it threatens their comfortability,
It's off the table.
Yeah, and we have seen that certain marginalized groups, they say, we are your protectors. We will fight for you. Vote for us. And we see in that exact same campaign how they rolled that back, how they cater to the predominantly white American public that leans more Christian.
Yeah,
And
even right now, like in the midst of all the stuff that Trump is doing, you look at like when the Kilmar Burger Garcia story was huge, like you had Democrats saying like this is a distraction.
yeah, like we should focus on serious things like policy.
This isn't a winning issue for Democrats, so maybe talk less about it.
Just abandon it. Rather than
Kilmar who?
Well, and that's the thing is like Republicans don't operate that way. No. They don't say, "Oh, this is not working." They brute force that shit. Yep. They say, "Oh,
and they're brute forcing it on things that are objectively deplorable, and we can't even like try to make a case for things that are moral imperatives."
Or like the fact that like we're not able to say like, okay, for example, there was a big talking point during the 2012 election where, Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts and had a state healthcare system. And they were pointing to that as like, oh, well, look at that hypocrisy rather than being like, that was a good thing. If we could have a Republican Party that did see the health outcomes of Americans that they supposedly care so much about.
But instead, it's the Republicans are the true leftists.
Yeah, they're the true leftists. Well, and shit, it pisses me off that like at this moment in time, like, Biden was only willing to say, oh, they're semi-fascist. Well, we have Stephen Miller out there pretty much every day, word for word copying what, Goebbels was saying about how like, oh, without the Jews, German children would be able to go to school and people would be able to get health care and stuff. Like, oh, it's just those people that are like, they're at least saying like, hey, we could give Americans health care, but this is in the way. What I see a lot from the Democratic Party is we could do things, but those pesky Republicans. That's why you have to vote for us.
Or those pesky leftists.
Yes, and it's like they hold the same disdain for leftists that they do. I would even argue in a lot of cases more disdain for the leftists because they're like, aren't you supposed to be on our side?
Yep.
Don't you care about women's rights?
Yep.
That's why they, maintain this culture of vitriol of like, see, leftists, isn't this what you wanted? Versus we were like, hey, maybe Biden should have stepped down earlier, like, or had an actual primary. Whoa. Maybe he should have kept his promise that he wasn't going to run again.
Yep.
But
see, I think just to kind of like wrap up, I think more than anything, what this whole chorus thing shows, it doesn't show that it doesn't even show like an explicit beholden to any kind of message, but it does show like how dysfunctional the Democratic apparatus is just on every face.
Yeah, I think that, it is quite funny to just see the amount of coverage of like, it's become a meme at this point of like Dems in disarray. And it's because they're unwilling
to compromise.
They're unwilling to be bold and brave and say, we're going to stand on some issues. And we've seen, whether it's David Hogg, other, advisors, other elected officials, they hold more animus towards people like Chris Van Hollen, a Maxwell Frost.
Yeah, Maxwell Frost, yep.
Anybody that's like vaguely somewhat left of liberal. They hold more animus for those people, put more pressure on those people, fund primary opponents against those people more so than they would ever do against a Manchin or Sinema.
Yep.
Those people are acceptable in the party. And those people are reasonable. They're serious. They're willing to sit down and do bipartisanship.
It's hard to even getting them to like condemn like Schumer, who is just objectively one of the single most unpopular politicians right now.
And that's the thing is like, I think that it kind of goes back to a point that I often think about of there's this like liberal wishful thinking that, and you hear it amongst the young as well too, but like even, middle-aged people like, once those old fuckers die, it will be better. And we're seeing perfectly encapsulated with this chorus story. They are training the next generation.
Yep.
They are saying good things are not possible. And even if they were, that would be socialism like Donald Trump is doing.
And leftists are just as bad as Republicans.
Yes, they are equivalent because they don't get in line and they can't take accountability. They say we are the adults in the room, but we can't take accountability for running failed campaigns, running failed
candidates.
Candidates. We talked about this offline about how the past few people that have run all failed in the previous primary.
Yep.
Whether it was Kamala in 2020, whether it was Biden did he run in 2008? Yeah, he ran in 2008, ran in the 80s. Hillary Clinton got beat by Obama.
And they just run the same campaigns again.
Mm-hmm, and they reject that they lost because of anything that they espouse. They say, it's this other group, whether it's Republican dark money when we want to actually call that out, or, it's these people that withheld their vote because they're just so much more morally pure than us. Like,
or again, like, it's because Hillary Clinton was a woman, even though like at the time, like you couldn't make a single criticism about her. Like one of my common criticisms of Hillary during 2016 was she's a hawk. And every time I said that, I was like, you just hate women.
Oh, you don't want women in the Pentagon? It's not helpful. Liberal representation.
It's destructive.
It is. And they're not winning. They're not winning on it. So rather than, trying to pander to marginalized groups or workers in general.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to, were you going to say basically like use levers of power?
Use marginalization as a cudgel against any kind of dissent.
Yeah, even other marginalized people saying, hey, we're kind of getting screwed over here. Yep. They're like, well, you sure wouldn't want, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, John McCain. You sure wouldn't want George W. Bush. Like, they basically look us in the face and say, this is the best we can offer you. Take it or leave it.
And then if we leave it, they yell at us.
Yeah, then also, fuck you. You cost us the election. It's like, it takes two to tango. And this unequal view that a lot of liberal pundits have and politicians even, that it's just the left's fault. We just lose because of the left. The left is just too far out there.
If the left would just fall in line.
Well, and it's like, is winning every election the most important thing? I don't think so.
Well, this is the common argument you always hear, right? You always hear the plan is to consolidate power and then use that power to transform. And the second part of that never, ever comes.
Yeah, it's like, we're gonna gain power, and then,
if we did that, we would lose power. Do you want us to lose power?
Do you want us to lose? Are you a hater? Do you just not like us? It's kind of those, it's kind of the typical abusive reaction of like, you say to somebody, hey, this isn't working for me. And they say, what, do you hate me? You want me to die?
They're playing the martyr.
Yeah. Do you want to be friends or in a relationship with somebody else?
You realize if you break up with me that like 10,000 people are going to die.
Yeah. Did you think about that? It must be because you're a privileged white leftist.
And you just hate black people.
And you're actually just really racist.
And homophobic.
Yep. And do we want to build a multiracial, multi-generational working class movement? Fuck no. No, that can never win. And why can't it win? Because we never try. You know, the people that try to build those coalitions get fucking rat fucked by the party and sit in backroom deals of like, yep, you're not serious. These are the same people, and it's like indistinguishable between liberals and the right. Of anytime there's a mass mobilization of protesters, it's always like, you should do it better.
Yep.
And what that means is shut up, go home. We're tired of being inconvenienced. Like, don't get in the way of me going to fucking a restaurant or my job. Like, as you perfectly said, they would much rather, you know, capitulate to the right than ever offer any solidarity for marginalized groups, the left. You know, they're willing to sacrifice us every time at the altar of capitalism to preserve their power.
Yep.